What's up, guys? We are back with a very long-awaited Star Wars review. Finally taking a look at the SH Figuarts Mandalorian. Of course, this is the initial appearance for Mandalorian, not the Beskar version, but I have really been looking forward to this figure just because, well, I really dig the Star Wars SHF stuff, and it's the Mando, so come on. So we've got him here in the standard retail style release packaging for Star Wars Figuarts. So you've got the big window there with the logos emblazoned on the front in gold foil. You've got a shot of the Mando on the side. You've got the logo running down the other side. And then the back of the box has got a smattering of product shots to show you what this guy can do. So let's do it. Let's pull him out and take a look. And here he is out of the package, our Figuarts Mandalorian, a figure which, again, I have really been looking forward to for a number of reasons. And for many of those reasons, I am really happy with this release. There are some things about this figure, though, that definitely have left me scratching my head. The words frustration and chore come to mind when I think about a few things regarding his construction. And when you put him together and put all the parts together, there's some weird stuff going on here that, I don't know, I figure I'm going to lose some pieces and then I'm just going to break a few things. So we've got some stuff to talk about. Thankfully, none of that really applies to Articulation because he does move really well. He's very similar to what you would expect to see with a Figuarts release. There's not a whole lot of new territory here, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So we've got a head that can look up. He can look down pretty good. He has an independently articulated neck, which you cannot see right now because of the cape. He can tilt really far side to side. We can pop this piece out, which is definitely going to be something we talk about. You've got arms that go out. They rotate all the way around. They do drop down as well, and you've got the caps that are articulated. There is a bicep swivel in there, and then you've got double jointed elbows, go really far, so he can, you know, kind of rest his head on his arm there if you need him to. You've got ball hinges at the wrist, of course, so you've got hinges, swivel, rotation, all that good stuff. So pretty wide range of motion like we're used to with this line. The torso does tilt side to side, and then he goes backwards and he goes forwards. And then, of course, you can twist. And then you've also got rotation at the waist. However, this thing is very similar to the Black Series, but just in many different ways at the same time, because just like the Mando in the Black Series has that peg that goes through the bandolier on the back, this guy has one on the front to kind of hide things and to cover things up a bit, but if you twist too far, it's going to pop off. So this is definitely one of those frustration things that I was talking about, and it's something that I don't like about the Black Series, and I don't like it here either. But we'll get to it. We'll get to it in more detail here shortly. You've got hinges on the holster for his gun. This is one of those holstered guns, just fully sculpted pieces that we see. So there'll be replacement parts there. Legs go out pretty far, pretty normal for a Figuarts. They kick forward, they kick backwards. There is a thigh cut. You've got drop down legs, but the drop down is actually in the thigh. I'm just gonna take that off. Just like the, what is it, the newest Stormtrooper, where the drop is actually in the thigh versus at the hip. So you've got drops there. You've got your knee joint. Not the greatest, really. It's good enough, but it's kind of oddly limited. And then you've got rotation, you've got rocker, you've got hinges, ball hinge basically at the ankles, and then you've got a toe hinge as well. So he is really normal for a Figuarts. Again, he's not really bringing anything new to the table, but he does have a lot of movement potential. However, a lot of that is stifled when it comes to this thing and the fact that there are a number of things you have to kind of plug in just to make him look normal. Now, as far as those looks go, I think for the most part, Bandai has done a really good job here. This guy, however, I think is going to be a little bit along the same lines as the Boba Fett figure, where he might be a little bit too clean for a lot of folks' taste. Doesn't bother me personally because that's the look for this line, so I'm already kind of invested in that aesthetic, and it works well here. A lot of the colors are incredibly rich and very saturated, especially these browns, definitely in comparison to the Black Series, which we'll take a look at here shortly. A lot of the colors are a little bit more just intense, really, and I do like them. I mean, the silvers pop a little bit more on this figure as far as what battle damage he does have, and it's honestly quite a bit more than I was expecting based on the fact that usually they are so clean. But this is a part of that look, and he does look great. Sizing is really nice too. I think the overall just design on the Mando lends itself really well to being a nice toy, and Bandai's done a really good job of kind of putting all of that together. So there is a lot of little bits and bobs all over him as far as, you know, pouches, like pouches under his holster. You've got canisters on his waist. You've got like thermal detonators on his waist, things like that. You've got like the Scarif Trooper style armor and the shoulder pad up here, just like the Black Series does, of course. But it just lends itself to being a really clean and crisp look, and in a general sense, I tend to prefer that when it comes to Star Wars figures. I really think that Bandai kind of hits the mark in that regard. It's just, at least for me personally, it's just something I like, whether it's necessarily screen accurate or not. I do like the kind of clean and crisp nature of things. It does lend itself to being a little bit divisive at times, and I think this is going to be the same way as Boba Fett was. Maybe not as bad as Boba Fett, but he does still have a little bit more of that clean aesthetic going on. But I really like it. I think it works really well. Now, there is one big thing to talk about, though, and that comes down to the cape. And of course, that is a difference from the Black Series. So the Black Series has that kind of half cape that it leans over to one side at all times. This guy has a non-wired cape. And I'm not going to say that I'm disappointed in that. Well, I guess I'm kind of disappointed. Maybe that is the best way to say it. I'm kind of disappointed in that because I know they can do wired capes and they can do them pretty well. The most recent Vader is a pretty good example of that. This guy I know would definitely benefit from having a wired cape, just like the one that I added to my Black Series, because it definitely needed one, and I think this guy could need one too. However, this cape works pretty well for what it is. Granted, it is kind of plain. The texture on it's really nice. Like, it's really soft and kind of plush almost is a good way to describe it. And it works really nicely for just being draped over him. I think it hangs well. I'm not so jazzed on the cut at the bottom. It's supposed to look kind of janky and haphazard, but it kind of comes across as being a little bit too much in my eyes. So we've kind of got that to deal with. And then there is a little problem in terms of how you get his gun to affix to the figure, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but it also hinges on this piece here. So this is the strap that I was talking about earlier, and this is the connection for his gun, but it also is something you remove. So when he's using his gun, this strap won't be there, and it hangs over top of the cape, so it kind of has to deal with that cape to begin with. And then there's this slit in the back, which the gun will actually peg, and I say that loosely, into his back. So you've got that aesthetically to deal with as well. I mean, if you're shooting him from the back and his gun's in there, it's not really going to matter. But if it's not there and he's from the backside, you're definitely going to see that, and it might be a pain point for some folks. But I do think it looks good. It hangs pretty well. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that a wired cape would have served this guy at least slightly better. And then when it comes lastly to the helmet, I do think that this guy looks a lot better than I had expected. Something about those original early shots made him look really small, made it look really narrow, made the visor look incredibly small, and he's definitely a little bit different than the Black Series. The sculpts are obviously not the same, but I think he looks a little bit better proportion than I had expected. He does still look slightly narrow in some respects, especially at the top of the helmet, but overall I think the look is pretty solid and the color works really well. It's very shiny. It's not metallic, but it's really shiny and it pops, especially in contrast to that black visor. I'm not sure if I have a preference over this helmet or Black Series yet, but I definitely don't have any issues with this one like I thought I was going to. I really expected there to be something weird about this when I got it out of the box, but I was pleasantly surprised. So I think this tops off the figure really nicely, and the color definitely works for me. Very nice pewter look that really adds a little bit of needed shine compared to all the cream and brown colors that the rest of the figure has going on. Now, as far as accessories goes, this guy is pretty well stocked. He obviously has a few extra things he could have been given as far as total accessories, but he definitely has more than the Black Series, and I think for this initial figure, it's kind of what you expect to get. So to start with, we do have a bunch of extra hands. There are 6 extra hands for 8 total, so you've got the fists that are on him in the package, and then you have got a gripping hand that's a really gripping hand. You've got 2 slightly less gripping hands, more kind of style pose hands. You have got some splayed finger hands, and then you have got a set of trigger finger hands. And then, of course, for those trigger fingers, we do have his little blaster pistol. So this is a free piece that does not go into a holster. You've got the extra piece here for the holster when it's not being used, and you can actually take the strap off of this one and put it onto this one, so it looks like it's been removed from this holster rather than it being empty. And this guy is just a kind of hinge. You just pop it off and then it'll swap back on. The big things for this figure, though, as far as accessories, and then where the big frustration lies, is in the larger gun, the blaster rifle, and how it all comes together, basically. Well, literally. So to start with, we've got the gun itself, and this guy is, of course, you know, the big concussive rifle, and this thing looks really good. I mean, it's got great size, great sculpt, a lot of paint on it, nice metallic paints for the gold and the silver, and it's very similar to the Black Series, but of course it also has a little bit more going for it in terms of just paint and overall little detail as well. Where it really kind of ventures off is just how it works. So this thing, as it stands, cannot be put on his back. It actually has a separate piece. So the gun itself disassembles. You can pop the butt of the gun off, and you can take the fork off of it as well. And this piece is where it all kind of comes together / falls apart, because we've got a different piece. We've got this guy here, and this thing has an extra piece on it that allows you to peg it in. So you pop this one on the end, and then you peg this guy on, and you've got your gun again, but it has this extra piece sticking off the backside here, and then you're able to actually put it on. But that's not where it ends, because you also have a piece you have to take off. There is a little tiny piece here, this little guy right here, that I'm certain I'm going to lose in the course of filming this review. That has to come off, and it pegs onto this strap here. And you peg it on ever so gently because, well, it's a real pain to do this, and there's no telling if I'm going to be able to do this correctly on camera. And it pegs onto his chest, and it hangs off of that strap that we talked about previously. And then from there, you have to take this and peg it into his back. And there's a slit on the cape, and I've already just can't even do it, basically. You have to take him apart to really show it. There's this piece here that pegs into this hole on his back, which frankly, it doesn't really work all that well. Like, mine does not want to stay in there at all. And it's to the point where I feel like the best way it's going to work is just to put the strap on him and then let it hang with the slot that's on his back, because it doesn't really want to work. I've had very little luck actually making it sit. Making it stay is an even harder thing to do. Once you actually get it in there, he's not really going to be able to move very well either, because just like the Black Series Mando, everything's all hinged on those pegs. Once things start to move and twist, it's just going to pop right out. And then to take the place of this gun, if you actually do take it off, because the strap comes with it, you've got this little piece here that pegs into the chest, and it's probably upside down. And then you can actually kind of fill the void that's on his chest if, again, you've got it all lined up correctly. So this is another one of those things that I don't like, and I think it's very janky to have to do this kind of stuff, because it's very difficult to actually accomplish that. So there's that piece now that it's fully in him, and you can see that's not easy. It's certainly not on camera when you're trying to film it happen, but it's just a weird system. I don't really like this piece. I don't think it's pegged correctly. I don't think it works really well. I don't like the fact that I have to even take the gun apart. I don't like that this little piece has to come out. This is just begging to be lost for sure once you actually get it on his back. I don't like this strap and how it works. So I like the way the gun looks. I really like the way the gun looks. Honestly, it's pretty fantastic. Nicely sculpted, nicely painted. But the implementation of getting it on his back just sucks. And then, like I mentioned, as far as comparing him to the Black Series, I mean, there is a lot to compare to, but at the same time, they are very different figures too. From construction to articulation to soft goods usage to paint, and then of course to how everything sort of fits together. They are quite different, but at the same time, this is a really odd instance where a Black Series figure is basically the same height as a Figuarts, or I should say a Figuarts is the same size as the Black Series. This guy does look to be a little bit thinner, maybe, our Figuarts, but for the most part, they are very, very close in size, which is definitely not the norm with this line. They normally don't size up this way, so you should have a good time actually putting this Figuarts into more quote-unquote normal 6-inch scale stuff. And I really think that, I mean, obviously this is a fantastic Black Series figure, but as far as aesthetics go, this is really doing it for me on a number of levels. But that's not to discount this figure because, well, I mean, he's pretty great. And then of course, this is not a stock cape. This is a Harker Customs cape. So you've got an option to replace this cape really easily, whereas this one is actually tucked under that breastplate. But there you go, as far as sizing them up and giving an idea of what the two look like side by side. And you can probably see a little bit better what I'm talking about when it comes to the sizing on that helmet, where he does look a little bit pinched in on the Figuarts, but at the same time, I think it looks pretty good still. But what about other figures that aren't the Mando? So we've got our Cara Dune here, and we've got our heavy Mando. So you can see there is quite a difference in size, but he still stacks up really well to these other figures. I think they look really nice together, and frankly, he fits in just as well as the Black Series does. What about a Trooper? So, you know, he does come across troopers in the show. So here he is with a Death Trooper, and they should be a little bit on the taller side, so it definitely fits here as well. And then another Figuarts is probably a good idea. So what about the one that I've talked about the most in this review? We'll take a look at Boba Fett next to him, and the Mando is slightly taller, and it comes through pretty well here. I mean, obviously they are still very different in design, but at the same time, you get an idea of what he looks like with another of his own kind. Well, sort of. And then what about the one thing that matters the most, at least until we get the Figuarts version? We've got our baby Yoda from the Black Series down there with him, and I think he stacks up just as well here as he does with the Black Series Mando. So if you've got another Black Series baby Yoda, child, whatever you want to call him, the asset, you can throw him up with your Figuarts Mando for the time being. So overall, there is a lot about this figure that I really like. I generally like everything about the articulation, and the way he looks, I think, comes across really well here in this particular release. But at the same time, there are definitely a few things that I just plain find frustrating and just don't like the way they were implemented. The strap on the bandolier, I don't like it. The way the gun comes apart to have to be put on his back, I don't like it. I don't like the slit in the cape. I don't like the way it pegs into the back, or should I say doesn't really peg at all, because the way that thing holds itself together is just not easy, and it certainly doesn't lend itself well to any kind of dynamic posing. It all hinges on you wanting him to be standing up straight, which is definitely not the way that this should go. He does look great, he does move great, but he certainly is not without his faults. So that's going to do it for this look at the Bandai Tamashii Nations SH Figuarts The Mandalorian. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.